Stop right there. I'm calling 911. Those words slammed into me like a warning shot before the real sirens even wailed down the street. You know what I mean? I was halfway through closing my garage door, still holding the remote mug of coffee cooling in my other hand. And there she was again, Karen Holbrook, standing at the edge of my driveway like she'd just caught the Zodiac. HOA President Phone raised her lips, quivering with a special blend of outrage and delight. "You're hiding something in there," she shouted across the fresh-cut grass. "I saw the lights, the machines. This is illegal activity." All I could do was stare back at her, the hum of the garage door motor filling up the silence between us. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "this is my home, and that's my garage." She didn't even blink. "We'll see what the authorities think," she fired back. And right then, as the distant echo of sirens cut through the cul-de-sac, I took the slowest, most deliberate sip of coffee and just smiled to myself. She had no idea who she'd just dialed up the police on. Let me back up a sec, all right? Before this whole neighborhood circus, before the binder waving the notes taped to my door, the parade of pastel leggings and threats, I picked this corner lot because of a single old maple tree. That tree leans right over the cul-de-sac like it's been guarding the spot since before the roads were poured. On those heavy summer afternoons, the shadow falls right on my driveway, turns my garage into a kind of sanctuary. The kind of place where a guy can take something broken and slowly, patiently make it whole again. That was all I ever wanted from Silver Ridge Estates. Just a little quiet shade, the smell of warm oil, the satisfaction of getting a carburetor right. I didn't move in to make a point. I moved here to disappear into regular life. Most mornings I'm up before the sun. 52 will do that to you. Body wakes up first, mind catches up a little later. I brew my coffee, crack open the side door, let that cool air roll across the concrete. My world narrows to a workbench, a pegboard, a radio with a busted antenna stuck on classic rock. There's a '74 Norton Commando sitting on the stand, polished by a dozen patient Saturdays. There's a red steel toolbox drawers that sing the same tired song when you open them. That's my rhythm. Small clicks, soft words. Just living. But Silver Ridge, man, it sells a different story. Brochures with families on bicycles, golden retrievers that seem union required. Houses all painted the same two shades of agreeable, porches lined up like sentry guards rocking chairs that never seem to rock. And the HOA rules, guidelines. They drop them off in a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. 2 approved mailbox designs. Acceptable shrub heights. No commercial activity. Garage doors open no more than 15 minutes unless you're loading or unloading. I remember reading that last one and thinking, who the heck is out here with a stopwatch? Didn't take long to find out. Karen Holbrook showed up on day 2. I was on a ladder cleaning the foyer fan when I heard a knock that could have started a fire. When I opened up, her smile was already set, one of those that says, "We're going to agree no matter what." Mid-50s hair shellacked into place cardigan that looked like rainbow sherbet, and a binder cradled like a newborn. Her name tag read President, because of course it did. "Welcome to Silver Ridge," she chirped. "We value neighbors who value standards." I told her, yeah, I do generally. She congratulated me for buying in during a competitive season, a phrase that sounded more like a threat. Then she flipped the binder open, found her page with a little flourish, and landed on 14.3b, exterior work visibility. She'd already been peeking in my garage. "We simply ask that resident projects remain tidy," she said, tasting the word, "and private. We don't want to inspire copycats." I promised I wouldn't corrupt the block with adjustable wrenches and honest sweat. She laughed, if you can call it that, a sound like wind chimes caught in a hailstorm. When she left, I noticed she'd slipped a glossy pamphlet into my doorframe. "Keep Silver Ridge safe," it read. Her number was highlighted first on the list, circled in pink. Report issues 24/7. The first month passed in little frictions. A yellow note after I watered the lawn at noon. Best practices before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Sun waste. Another note about my garden hose visible from the street. Another about my trash can lid. Each signed with a little K, somehow both cheerful and accusatory. I taped those notes above the workbench, a growing collection of mini warrants. At first it made me laugh. But you know how it goes. Novelty wears off. Frustration fills in. What did you do to her? My neighbor Leah asked me at a Saturday block sale. She and her husband Ken had a table full of baby clothes signs said, "Everything must go," which felt a little threatening for a marriage, but it was just the onesies. "Close my garage," I said. She winced. "You're one of those." One of what? Men who like doors. She says doors send messages. Ken showed up with a box of plastic dinosaurs that looked like they'd survived the Ice Age. Privacy is suspicious in this zip code. We laughed, but not for long. See, Silver Ridge trains you to talk fast in public like a ship's crew under watch. Smiles here are just rehearsals for the next horn blast. You learn the rhythm. Monday morning, Karen jogs the loop, snapping pictures of unmotivated grass. Wednesday night board meetings at the clubhouse, light refreshments, heavy sighs. Friday afternoon, she sits under the maple with an iPad tapping notes like she's composing an aria called Order. She loved that word, order. It was on her letters, her tote, her office door. Order is kindness. I had a different definition. Still, I can be civilized. I waved. I nodded when the newsletter praised vigilant leadership. I trimmed my boxwoods to a morality-approved height. Kept the radio low. Logged my work hours after 8 before 6. I did all of it not out of fear, just trying an experiment. What if I just let life happen to me for once? Even so, the notes kept coming. The font got bolder. The language shifted from suggestion to citation. One morning I found an envelope taped to my garage. Formal notice of violation, 3 boxes, checked, noise unapproved activity, safety concern. Section 9.2. No resident shall operate or appear to operate a business from the garage or premises. Attached was a photo of me hunched over the Norton garage door half down. Karen's caption in blue ink, visible work suggests commerce. I brought it to my neighbor across the street, Priya lawyer's posture, gardener's hands. She read it, mouth a flat line. "This is bluster," she said. "A garage isn't a storefront because a human stands in it. Keep your door where you want it." "Tell that to the president," I replied. "I have." She quotes bylaws and calls it law. Priya looked at my face and softened. "If you need me at a meeting, I'll come." See, there's a move people use when they want to control you. They force you to explain yourself. Every conversation becomes a deposition. When Karen intercepted me at the mailbox that evening, she led with that move. "What are you doing there?" she asked. "Fix things," I said. "Fix what metal mistakes time." "Are you licensed for fixing time?" she asked, trying to catch me in a riddle. "No," I said. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's a garage." She raised her phone, snapped a photo of my face. "Documentation," she said. "Residents have a right to feel safe." "They do," I agreed, "and a right not to be harassed." Her smile turned sharp. "Harassment is a legal term. So is trespass." That night, the HOA newsletter announced Neighborhood Watch 2.0, a call for vigilance against garage-based activity that may undermine property values, with a stock photo of a wrench taped over caution tape. Subtlety was not Karen's tool. I tell you all this not to paint myself a hero. Heroes are loud, and loud is easy. I'm a quiet man who likes his bolts organized by size, who listens to rooms before he speaks. Silver Ridge was supposed to be a break, but breaks split wherever pressure finds them. Pressure found me 3 ways: the notes, the newsletter, the looks. Some neighbors steered strollers an extra foot away from my driveway. A teenage boy filmed my garage for a class project, whispered, "That's the guy." The smallest lights do the deepest work. They make you foreign to the place you pay for. I called the non-emergency line just for sanity. "What's illegal garage use?" I asked the dispatcher. "As long as you're not running a chop shop, you're fine." "Define chop shop." "You'd know if you were running one." "I'm not." "Then you're not." I hung up. I didn't want permission, just clarity. Thursday, before the sirens, I left the door down for 20 minutes, rain coming down, steady, sidewalk, shiny and dishonest. I needed to solder a wire harness, keep the temp and humidity right. When I hit the remote to open the garage, the maple had gathered 1,000 beads of light, and there was Karen phone out filming the door as it rose. We locked eyes like fencers touching blades. "I timed it," she said. "I hope you beat your personal best." I shot back. 20 minutes. 15's a guideline, not a curfew. Rules are rules. So's gravity. Still, we jump. She flexed her jaw, said, "Some of us care about standards. Some of us care about lives." That was my mistake. She wasn't here for the truth. She was here for the win. She walked off, fingers flying across her screen. I just stared at my cooling solder. You learn to read people by how they handle defeat. Karen's style was escalation. That night, I laid out my parts on a towel, told myself, don't react. The universe has its own calendar. If someone wants to run headfirst into the law, you don't push, you just step aside. In the morning, coffee in hand, I pressed the remote. The garage door eased down, steady as always. In that last inch of daylight, I saw Karen at the end of my driveway rehearsing her lines. The door clicked shut, the world turned the page. By nightfall, her binder would come out. Notes would turn into threats. And those words, "Stop right there, I'm calling 911, would rip the air again, only this time with an audience. But in that quiet moment, just me, my coffee, the last inch of daylight, I did what I always do when a storm decides it loves me. I took a breath, measured the space between impulse and action, and chose to be ordinary for one more minute. It wouldn't last. People like Karen don't permit ordinary. They mistake calm for confession. They mistake doors for secrets. They mistake a man repairing something for a man preparing something. And when they make enough mistakes, something else wakes up in me, not anger, not pride, just the old trained patience of someone who knows what to do when somebody points at a garage and says illegal like it's a curse. That's how the madness began, with a binder, a stopwatch, and a woman determined to turn peace into a performance. And let me tell you, it's not how it ended. It started on a Saturday morning so ordinary it could have come from any suburban postcard until, well, it wasn't. The sun was barely up, hanging there over the rooftops like a worn-out nickel. You could still smell wet asphalt from the sprinklers finishing their early shift. My garage door was open halfway, Fleetwood Mac humming from a static-filled radio, when I heard the sound that meant trouble in Silver Ridge, a sharp, deliberate click of high heels on concrete. Karen Holbrook, binder under her arm, phone in hand, sunglasses big enough for a SWAT team. She looked like a lawyer ready to cross-examine a garden gnome. I didn't even look up. I'd learned acknowledging her too soon just fuels her fire. But Karen didn't believe in subtlety. She cleared her throat loud enough to shatter glass. "Mr. Cole," she announced, "you were informed about the garage use restrictions last month, Section 9.2. "Yes, Karen, I remember." She gestured at my half-closed garage. "And yet, here you are again." "It's sunny." I said, "Chrome and sunlight don't mix." Clicker camera fired. "I'm documenting this. We've received credible reports of suspicious activity coming from your property." I laughed under my breath. "Suspicious activity? You mean engines?" She stiffened. "You know what I mean. People saw strangers coming late at night." "UPS," I offered. "Or raccoons." Her jaw tightened like wet cement drying. If you won't take this seriously, I'll have to escalate. We can't risk someone operating an unlicensed business or other things. Other things, I repeated, like terrorism, arms dealing, counterfeit lemonade. Her lips twitched, not into a smile. She raised her phone higher. Step back from the garage, please. I need to record this properly. Karen, you're filming a man fixing a carburetor. You don't need a warrant or a witness. You need a hobby. That was it. Her nostrils flared. Her finger hovered dramatically over her phone. And then she hit me with that line, detonated the piece in Silver Ridge. Stop right there. I'm calling 911. I froze more out of disbelief than fear. You're calling the police because I closed my garage. Because you're acting hostile and possibly armed. Armed, I repeated. With a wrench. I saw metallic objects, she insisted. And you raised your voice. I haven't raised my voice, I said softly. Not yet. But she was already talking to dispatch, pacing tight little circles like an actress rehearsing her big scene. Yes, hello, this is Karen Holbrook, HOA president. We have a male resident barricaded in his garage. Possible weapons. Acting erratic. I almost laughed at the word barricaded. Door was half open, sunlight pouring in. She had the subtlety of a fire alarm. The dispatcher's voice was faint, but I heard, "Ma'am, is he threatening you?" "Not directly, but I feel unsafe. He's glaring." "I'm squinting," I called over. She ignored me. "Yes, please send someone quickly. We have children here." I sighed, leaned against the workbench, and took another slow sip of coffee. The absurdity almost calmed me. When you've spent years in federal service, listening to real emergencies, talking people off actual ledges, you learn to measure danger by silence, not by volume. Karen was pure volume. 5 minutes later, the sirens arrived, slicing through the calm like an unwanted soundtrack. 2 police SUVs rolled in, lights flashing. Curtains twitched across the block, Silver Ridge tuning in for another live HOA drama. Karen flagged down the police like she'd just spotted D.B. Cooper. "That's him. Don't let him close the door." I pressed the remote, let the garage door glide down until only a foot of daylight remained just to see her face. She gasped like I'd set off a bomb. The officers came up, cautious hands near their belts. The younger one, polite, called, "Sir, can you step outside, please?" "Of course," I said. I lifted. The door stepped into the morning with my mug still in hand. Karen practically dove behind one of the police cars. "Be careful, he's unpredictable." The cop glanced at her, then at me, trying to decide if this was real or just another HOA Tuesday. "Sir, we got a call about a barricade situation." I smiled. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Only thing barricaded here is a faulty carburetor." The older cop, the type who's seen every flavor of suburban nonsense, peered into the garage. "Looks normal. Tools, bike, coffee, no hostages." Karen stepped forward, indignant. "Of course you'd say that he probably hid everything. Look at his demeanor. Cold, evasive, trained." The older cop raised an eyebrow. "Trained at what, ma'am?" "Something military, maybe. I can tell. He's too calm." "Ma'am," he replied, "calm isn't a crime. It should be when it's suspicious." The younger cop tried not to laugh. "Do you have any evidence of illegal activity?" Karen hesitated. "I heard noises, mechanical, at night." "That's what garages do," we said, almost in unison. She flushed. "This neighborhood has standards. There are bylaws. Bylaws aren't laws," I offered. "Stay out of this," she snapped. "Trying to," I said. The older cop stepped between us. "All right, let's dial this down. Sir, can we just see some ID for our report?" "Sure," I said, handing over my license. He looked at it, then at me. I could tell he recognized the name, but didn't quite place it. "Appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Cole. We'll file this as a false alarm." Karen's voice shot up an octave. "False? Are you saying I fabricated a crime?" "I'm saying there isn't one. I demand you investigate further, search his property." The younger officer was done. "Ma'am, without probable cause, we can't just—" "I am probable cause. I'm the HOA president." I nearly choked on my coffee. That's not a federal title, Karen. Enough from you. You think you're untouchable. I'll find out who you really are. That line, "I'll find out who you really are," stuck with me. She didn't say it like she was curious. She said it like she was promising revenge. The officers left after warning her about false reports. Karen stayed in the street glaring at my garage as the door rolled down. For a moment, her face changed, not anger but fear, not of me but of something in her own past. When the sirens faded, when the neighbors melted back into their staged, normal, I sat on my stool, elbows on my knees, looking at my reflection in the steel door. I'd promised myself moving here not to bring my work home, but Karen's words echoed. "I'll find out who you really are." Thing is, curiosity is contagious. So that night I opened my laptop. I typed her name into the federal database, not the public one, the deep one, the one with layers. What came up was almost blank. Too blank. No employment records before 2009, no property before Silver Ridge, no aliases, no tickets. Perfect. And perfect is always a problem. Files like that don't just appear, they're made. Somebody cleaned her record. And people who get their records cleaned well, they got something to hide. That's when it hit me. The garage, the notes, the call, all of it was just noise hiding a bigger signal. I wasn't dealing with a bored neighbor. I was dealing with someone who spent her life pretending to be ordinary. And I knew exactly how to find out why. That night, with Silver Ridge sleeping under its neat rows of streetlights, I drafted a quick email to an old contact in D.C., someone who owed me a favor. Need a deep pull on Karen Holbrook's Silver Ridge Estates, possible alias. Start with sealed state records, early 2000s. Then I closed the laptop, let the radio hum, and sat in the quiet. Karen thought she'd just called the cops on a garage guy. She had no idea she'd just declared war on the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Let me back up one more time. When you've spent years tracking professional liars, you develop a sense for the ones who try too hard to look clean. That was Karen. The pastel house, the out-of-season roses, the mail never sitting in her box for more than 20 minutes, everything polished. But the emptiness in her file was the real giveaway. People don't live spotless lives, they just hire better janitors. I didn't want to pull that thread. Not at first. I came here to retire, not relive old habits. But the way she came at me, the way she needed to control everything around her, I'd seen it behind two-way glass too many times before. HOA bylaws were just her new badge. When she called 911, that badge became a weapon. 2 days after the barricade incident, my DC contact Harper hit me up on an encrypted channel. Pulled your Karen, weird file. State ID exists, but pre-2009, there's a sealed record flag, DOJ privacy. Need clearance from above your old pay grade. Me. That's funny. Above my old pay grade would be me. Harper. Exactly. Want me to nudge the archives? Me. Do it. And check for aliases. This smells like identity laundering. Harper. Roger that. I'll dig. I grinned at the screen, muscle memory kicking in. Only now the person I was investigating wasn't a mob accountant or a cyber crook. It was the woman taping violation letters to my door. That night I sat in my garage, just me, the laptop, and the Norton's chrome tank reflecting the blue glow. I pulled up my old bureau codes, retired or not. I still had director-level clearance. Typed them in, hit enter, hit. What came back wasn't a clean dossier. It was fractured, like somebody cut out the story and taped the safe words back in. Name Kara Lee Holman. DOB redacted. Criminal history classified under State Rehab Program 2003. Notations violent offense dismissed on procedural error. Affiliations under investigation for financial fraud 2006. Charges dropped. Subject relocated under sealed identity protection order. Reason undisclosed. Now, identity protection orders. They're for two types of people, key witnesses or manipulators who cut deals to save themselves. Judging by Karen's little empire, I was betting on the latter. Then the next entry made my blood run cold. 2003 Baton Rouge PD, aggravated assault, hate-motivated bar brawl, 3 hospitalized, 1 weapon recovered. Suspect Kara Holman. Outcome sealed, expunged after 24 months. My garage felt smaller suddenly. Karen, the woman hunting for garden gnome violations, once started a hate-fueled bar brawl that put 3 people in the hospital. People don't change like that. They just get better at hiding. Every few years, a reset. That's not random. That's a system. Someone high up helped her bury that past, which meant leverage. The next morning, I found Priya on her porch, hands in gloves, trimming rose bushes, but her eyes sharp as ever. "Big excitement last weekend," she said. "You're a local celebrity now." Not the kind I wanted. She's been bragging about it, telling everyone she caught a criminal in the act. Did she mention the police apologized to me? Does Karen ever mention apologies? I hesitated, then asked, "How long's she been president?" 5 years. 1 after the last guy moved out, scared 3 candidates off before the vote. Why? Trying to understand her history, I said. Priya snorted. History. She doesn't have one. Or that's what she says. Moved from up north after a divorce. No kids, no records, no relatives. The kind who just appears fully formed like a bad idea. That night, Harper called again. "You were right, she's not just Karen Holbrook. Alias, tied to a nonprofit Sunline Community Initiative, flagged for suspicious transfers 6 years ago. Guess who signed the checks, Karen?" She funneled HOA funds into the nonprofit, then the nonprofit paid shell contractors. Amount about $120K. And her brother Stephen Holman racketeering in Arizona, member of the Ridgewell Order. I frowned. That hate group's still active. Guess who posted bail for him back in 2005? When I hung up, I realized just how deep I was. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. It was a ghost operation hiding in plain sight, run by a woman who used neighborhood bureaucracy to launder money and control perception. And now, she'd picked me as her next scapegoat. The next day, I went to my first HOA meeting. The clubhouse was just as I expected, smelled like burnt coffee and old anxiety folding chairs set up in little rows, a whiteboard up front where the marker ink never quite erased. Karen presided at the head of the long oak table, American flag behind her artificial lilies in a vase, and that infamous binder open in front of her like a courtroom Bible. When I walked in, she looked up, smile as tight as the strings on a cheap banjo. "Oh, Mr. Cole, how brave of you to show up after last week's incident." I shrugged. "Just here to learn, Karen. I like to know how justice works in this neighborhood." Her lips curled. "Justice. We prefer order." The meeting went on landscaping, pool schedules, ongoing safety concerns about unauthorized garage activity. Every time Karen spoke, it was pure theater. But I wasn't listening to her. I was watching the board, looking for cracks. Leonard, a nervous guy down at the end, wouldn't meet her eye whenever finances came up. After the meeting, I caught him in the hallway. "How long's she been handling the books?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder, lowered his voice. "Since before I joined." She says transparency is handled internally. I've never seen a ledger. "You ever ask once?" She threatened to fine my daughter for leaving her scooter on the sidewalk. That's all I needed to know. Classic intimidation. Make the punishment personal, keep people compliant. I thanked him. Mind-buzzing control, the rules control, the fear control, the money. But there was something else nagging at me, the photo Harper had sent from the 2003 assault. Karen, half a lifetime younger, same face, but the eyes. Wild, unhinged. The same eyes I'd seen when she screamed at me to stop. She hadn't changed, just found a legal outlet for her violence. Later that night, as rain drummed on the roof, I spread out all the evidence. Fraud, assault, laundering, identity change, hate group ties enough to bury her if she ever had a career left. But this wasn't about revenge. I wanted exposure. Not shouting, just facts, truth that rearranges a room without raising its voice. So I planned the next move. I'd build a trail she couldn't deny, every transaction, every grant, every HOA dollar. The bylaws had a transparency clause. All members could request association expenditures with 72 hours' notice. Karen couldn't refuse without contradicting her beloved rules. I drafted the email, "Dear President Holbrook, in the spirit of transparency, I'd like to review the past 2 years of HOA financial records. I'm sure you'll agree this demonstrates our shared commitment to order." Her reply took 15 minutes. "Mr. Cole, your tone is noted. Records available upon written request at the next scheduled meeting. KH." That line, "your tone is noted," her favorite move. Passive-aggressive as a yellow warning sign. 3 days later, I walked into the clubhouse with a leather folder and a tiny digital recorder clipped inside my jacket. I wasn't there as the former bureau director. I was just a neighbor who happened to know how to build a federal-grade case file. The room smelled of tension and burnt coffee. Karen sat with 2 board members, Leonard and a timid woman named Ruth. She slid a fat binder across the table. "I trust this is about putting our little misunderstanding behind us." "Exactly," I said. "I just want to know where my dues go. I'm sure everything's in perfect order. Of course, Silver Ridge maintains impeccable records." She gestured for me to open the binder. Inside every receipt and invoice was arranged like a work of art, dated, sorted, cross-referenced. Too perfect. I've seen forgeries before, and if you know the signs, you smell them before you see them. Some of these pages look like they were printed yesterday, ink still shiny. "Impressive," I said, flipping through. "You keep backups." She tensed just for a second. "Off-site. Mind if I make some copies? That won't be necessary. These are internal documents. Bylaws say members are entitled to duplicates." Her jaw tightened. "You've read the bylaws?" "I like literature," I replied. Leonard coughed. Ruth checked her phone like it was a lifeline. Karen smiled, but her eyes went icy. "I'll prepare summaries. We wouldn't want confusion from misinterpreting technical data. Numbers can be tricky," I agreed. I left with nothing physical but everything I needed. Her evasions, the nervous tone, the refusal to let me copy every lie she told was its own affidavit. That night I called Harper. We cross-referenced vendor names from the binder against federal tax databases. 11 listed contractors, 5 didn't exist. 3 were P.O. boxes in Arizona, the same town as her brother's company. 1 matched the Shell landscaping business tied to the Ridagewell investigation. "Classic layering," Harper muttered. "She's routing HOA money through fake invoices, washing it through her brother's firm, then into the Ridagewell fund. Small potatoes, but still criminal. Can you trace the transfers?" "Already on it. Give me a week." But I didn't have a week. Karen escalated again. The next morning, another envelope on my garage violation notice, non-compliance with conduct standards, red ink at the bottom. Harassment of HOA president. She'd filed a formal complaint accusing me of intimidation at the records meeting. The audacity was almost beautiful. I kept the notice, dated it, and smiled. Now I had evidence of retaliation. So I built the trap. Karen needed to believe she'd caught me breaking a rule, so she'd document it as usual and cross into trespassing or illegal surveillance. If she did, I'd have proof for the sheriff and the bureau. Meanwhile, Harper could finish tying the financials together. My bait. I parked my truck half and half out of the garage, a stack of boxes labeled property files on the bench, a USB drive marked grant reports sitting right on top. The drive was a decoy. It only had a document titled Audit Summary Sunline Community Initiative with a digital tracker that would ping Harper's server the moment someone copied it. By noon, Karen was there pretending to photograph flowers at the edge of my driveway. She lingered pacing, glancing into the garage, circling like a shark. I ignored her, kept sanding a piece of maple, pretending not to notice. She left after a while, but that night Harper called, We got a ping. Someone copied the decoy file from the HOA office at 6:17 p.m. Got her, I said. Careful, Harper warned. She's volatile. I'm not pushing, I'm inviting gravity. 2 days later, she snapped. Her white Lexus screeched into my driveway and she jumped out waving papers. You think you're clever, don't you? Planting false documents to frame me. Good afternoon, Karen. That's a serious accusation. I know you hacked the HOA files. I don't have access to HOA files, Karen. You do. She froze just long enough. Why would you assume I have your files unless you looked at mine? Her face turned red. You're manipulating this community. You mean auditing. You're dangerous. She fumbled for her phone again. I'm calling 911. This time I didn't try to stop her. I wanted witnesses. When the officers arrived, I greeted them with coffee and played the recording from her last visit. Officer Lane, who recognized me from federal briefings years ago, gave me a subtle nod. Everything okay here, he asked. Miss Holbrook is upset, I explained. She's accused me of hacking the HOA system. Maybe she can explain how she found data from my computer on her device. Karen blinked. What? No, he's twisting. Do you have the device, ma'am? Lane asked. Yes, but those are fabricated files. Then you won't mind if we take a look. Her confidence fell apart. This is harassment, ma'am. Hand over the device, Lane said. She did. Within minutes, the tracker confirmed her phone accessed the decoy USB, transmitted the data to her office computer, chain of custody time-stamped. Karen's voice trembled. You set me up. No, I said. You set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity. She backed away, eyes darting to the officers. He's dangerous, she whispered. He's not who he says he is. Ma'am, do you know who he is? Lane asked. No. Some mechanic pretending to be Lane cut her off. I'd recommend you stop talking. For the first time, Karen Holbrook looked uncertain. The officers left with her phone as evidence. She drove off pale and shaking. That night, Harper called again. We followed the trail. HOA's account fed directly into the Sunline Fund, then into 3 personal checking accounts under her alias. Airtight. How soon can we move tomorrow morning? Local and federal warrants. I looked around my garage, smelled the coffee, felt the air before a storm. Let's end this cleanly, I said. Any regrets? Harper asked. Only that it took me this long to start. The next morning, Silver Ridge woke to the sound of unmarked cars gliding into our cul-de-sac. You know that moment when the storm finally rolls in, the air feels charged, and even the birds get quiet. That was it, agents in windbreakers moving with that silent clockwork precision you only see in big cases. Karen stepped out onto her porch, pink blazer, buttoned eyes wide as they read her rights. She tried to shout about HOA sovereignty, bylaws, conspiracies, but no one listened. Not this time. Neighbors pressed against windows, mouths open. For once, the whole street fell silent. As they led her to the car, she caught my eye. No anger, just that glint of recognition, the look of a predator finally realizing the prey was never really prey. I raised my coffee cup in a quiet salute. You wanted order, I murmured. Now you'll have it. The car rolled away, and for the first time since moving in, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, pure, honest silence. That morning, Silver Ridge looked like a movie set after the last shot. Lawns too perfect, air too still, windows wide open for the whispers. People didn't mow their lawns that day, they just stared. The woman who fined kids for sidewalk chalk, who cited retirees for wind chimes, had been cuffed and taken off her own porch at sunrise. It should have felt like victory, but honestly, it felt like a stack of paperwork waiting to happen. So I did what I always do when a storm passes. I sat down, organized the facts, before the emotion had time to grow claws. The file on my desk was thick, falsified invoices, financial trails that sealed criminal history, Harper's chain of custody from the tracker, The warrants had gone off clean, minimal noise, maximum effect. Karen was cooling off in the county detention center held pending fraud and identity theft charges. But the storm wasn't over. When corruption hides in plain sight, exposure doesn't end it. It wakes it up. By noon, the HOA called an emergency meeting, and you better believe I wasn't surprised. Panic always shows up quick when power suddenly goes missing. The clubhouse buzzed with the anxious energy of 30 neighbors stuffed into folding chairs. Leonard sat up front, clutching a folder like a flotation device. Ruth hands wringing whispered prayers. At the front, Harold Bishop, vice president, tried to play referee. "Everyone, please, let's keep this professional," he said, voice shaking. "We'll begin shortly." "Professional." A woman near the front snapped. They took her away in handcuffs. "Let's not rush to judgment," Harold replied. "We don't have all the facts. We have the video," someone shouted, holding up a phone. "It's all over the neighborhood page. FBI federal warrants." "You think that's a misunderstanding?" The room was a powder keg. Harold tried to calm the crowd. "We have a guest who can help clarify certain matters," he said. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. "Afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Cole. I live on Maple Court. Most of you probably know me as the garage guy." Nervous laughs. Turns out that garage was more useful than anyone realized. I walked to the projector, opened my folder. "These are the financial transfers from your HOA account over the past 3 years," I said, clicking to the first spreadsheet. Roughly $120,000 in community funds were redirected through a nonprofit Sunline Community Initiative, a company with no employees, no address, no service history. The room started to shift uncomfortable. That nonprofit in turn sent payments to a landscaping firm registered to Stephen Holman, Karen's brother. Murmurs rolled across the room. Every dollar disguised as playground upgrades, tree trimming, community events. None of those projects ever happened. You all paid for them. Harold looked pale. "Mr. Cole, how did you get this information?" "Let's just say I have some experience in investigations." Someone stood up. "So she was stealing from us all this time?" "Yes. And she did it under a false name. Her real identity is Kara Holman's sealed record for aggravated assault, prior fraud charges, and ties to a hate group. The seals were lifted this morning." The room erupted, shock, anger, disbelief, every flavor of betrayal filling the air. "She fined me for painting my fence beige," a man yelled. "She made me replant my garden because the tulips were the wrong color," another sobbed. "She told me my disabled son's wheelchair ramp was a violation," a woman whispered. I waited for the noise to die. "I know," I said softly. "She did a lot worse to others. But what matters now is the truth. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Leonard stood up shaking. "Mr. Cole, are you with the police?" I paused, looked around. "Not exactly. I'm the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." You could have heard a pin drop. Harold blinked. "The FBI?" "Yes. I moved here to retire quietly. Didn't expect federal-level corruption in a cul-de-sac." The laughter that followed wasn't relief exactly. It was the sound that comes when fear finally lets go of your throat. Ruth, voice trembling, asked, "So she was a criminal?" "Not anymore. Now she's a case file." After the meeting, neighbors surrounded me with questions. Some cried, some apologized for believing her stories. A few were angry at themselves for keeping quiet. I told them what I always tell victims: silence isn't weakness, it's survival until the truth has a witness. By evening, news vans lined the street. "Director Cole, can you confirm the charges?" "I can confirm that the law applies to everyone, even those who hide behind bylaws." That night, HOA president linked to fraud and hate groups was trending. Silver Ridge went viral. For me, though, the job wasn't done. Harper called from D.C. "She's talking," he said. "Trying to cut a deal. Claims she was laundering for someone higher up." I snorted. There's always someone higher up. Track it. He laughed. You realize you just became the most famous man in suburban America. I'd rather be anonymous. Too late. You're a meme now. That weekend, the board held another meeting, this time outside under the gazebo sunlight, replacing secrecy. Harold stepped down, citing emotional exhaustion. The board voted unanimously to dissolve the old leadership and start over. They asked me to run, but I just laughed. Trust me, you don't want a federal agent in charge of your block party. They elected Priya instead. She accepted with a modest smile and immediately pushed reforms open: financial books, fair complaints, term limits. The crowd cheered. For the first time since moving in, Silver Ridge felt like a real neighborhood. Priya caught me as the meeting ended. You could have walked away, she said, moved out, let her self-destruct. I smiled. Corruption only destroys itself if someone shines the light long enough. You'll stay, she asked. Someone has to make sure the lights stay on. That night I sat in my garage, the same spot this all started. The Norton's tank gleamed under the bulb, the air thick with oil and sawdust. Across the cul-de-sac, kids rode scooters where Karen's voice used to echo. Someone grilled steak. A dog barked, not as an alarm, but just because it could. On my workbench sat the final HOA file, stamped and sealed by the Bureau. I poured one last cup of coffee, stepped outside, and looked up at the stars hanging over Silver Ridge like new promises. My phone buzzed. Harper. Nice work. Community owes you. I texted back. They owe themselves. He replied. Ever think about coming back? No. I think about staying human. I slipped the phone in my pocket, watched the quiet street, saw my own reflection, 1 foot in the old world, 1 foot in the new. I pressed the remote. The garage door rolled down, slow humming, sealing away the past and the evidence. For the first time, it felt like closure, not defense. Silver Ridge slept easy that night. So did I. The sound of justice, if you ask me, isn't the clang of a gavel or the click of handcuffs. It's something quieter. Paper sliding into folders, signatures drying in blue ink, the low hum of truth finally filling the space where lies used to live. That's what Silver Ridge felt like in the weeks after Karen Holbrook's downfall, an entire community figuring out what real silence was. Funny thing, she didn't go quietly. People like her rarely do. Even from county detention, Karen kept up the act, scribbling handwritten statements to the board, claiming she was the victim of a federal smear campaign. She accused me of hacking her computer, planting evidence, harboring resentment toward strong women in authority. I'd heard worse. At the end of the day, it didn't matter what she said. The evidence spoke louder. What started in my garage had grown into a multi-state financial case. Harper's team traced funds from the Ridgewell Order, Karen's brother's hate group, to 3 other HOAs across the Southwest, each with its own president tangled up in the same network. We hadn't just uncovered neighborhood corruption. We'd stumbled onto a laundering ring hidden in the last place anyone would look: suburban order. You don't hide chaos behind chaos, you hide it in the rules. The DOJ kept me updated out of courtesy. Technically, I was still on sabbatical, but it's not the kind of thing you walk away from. Karen's arraignment was a spectacle. Local media, 3 different networks, all hungry for a headline about FBI director victimizes HOA president. That never came. Instead, they ran with the truth: suburban HOA exposed as front for fraudulent charity network. Seeing her in orange hair frizzed under fluorescent lights, still trying to control the narrative, it was almost surreal. This is all a misunderstanding, she told the cameras, but the deputy shut the door before she could finish. 3 weeks later, I was subpoenaed to testify at her preliminary hearing. I hadn't stepped into a courtroom in years, but some things never change. Old paper, aftershave, tension hanging in the air. The judge was a calm woman with half-moon glasses, a voice that could cut through marble. Karen sat at the defense table, wrists chained, eyes hollow, but still sharp. When she saw me walk in, her face flickered hatred, disbelief, like she was still convincing herself this was just a nightmare. Mendoza. The prosecutor began simply. Director Cole, can you tell the court why you began investigating Ms. Holbrook? Because she called 911 on me for closing my garage, I said. You could feel the irony hang in the air, a few soft laughs even from the judge. And what did you discover as a result of that incident, Mendoza pressed? That her 911 call wasn't the only false report she'd ever made. I laid it all out, timeline sealed records, fraudulent transfers, the alias, the digital evidence, the tracker. Just the facts, no drama, no speeches. Karen tried to interrupt twice, shouting, "He's lying," and later standing up. "You don't know what they did to me." Her lawyer yanked her down like she was a loose balloon. When it was over, the judge thanked me for my clarity, dismissed the court until sentencing. She stared at me as they led her away. Her voice was small-breaking. "You ruined everything." "No," I said quietly. "You did." The sentence came 2 months later, 8 years for fraud, identity theft, obstruction. No bail. Restitution, $200 to the HOA, $280 in federal fines. Probation for 5 years after release. It wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. The community moved on slowly, like a wound learning how to scar. Some neighbors repainted their houses. Some stopped locking their mailboxes. The paranoia faded and was replaced by little acts of rebellion that felt like freedom. Kids played basketball after 9. Lawn chairs stayed out overnight. Music at barbecues got a little louder. Priya, officially the new HOA president, launched Open Books Fridays, where anyone could review financial records with free coffee and no fear. The first week, no one came. By the third half, the block did. Transparency was the new rebellion. She asked me to join the board. I declined, but I helped behind the scenes reviewing policy drafts, mediating neighbor disputes, setting up cybersecurity for the new HOA systems. Pro bono, I told her. Federal rehab therapy. Still even peace leaves echoes. One afternoon, a plain manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single photograph, Karen, standing beside a man in a black suit outside a charity gala bannered with Sunline Community Initiative. On the back, in sharp handwriting, still missing. I sent it to Harper. Within hours, he called. The guy next to her is Richard Hale, accountant for Ridgewell, skipped trial in 2010, off the radar ever since. Think she was still working with him? Wouldn't surprise me. People like that recycle identities like paper towels. We'll dig. The thought left a chill in my spine. The network was bigger than we'd uncovered, maybe national. That night I sat in my garage again. The Norton gleamed, but I couldn't focus on it. The air felt different, colder, alert. Maybe it was instinct, maybe paranoia, but I felt eyes on the house. Old habits die hard. I checked the cameras, nothing. Still, I knew enough to trust my gut. I opened the photo again, studied the faint reflection in the gala window, a third person, blurry, watching from across the street. I scanned it, ran facial recognition. No match, just another ghost. The next morning, Harper emailed, "We're reopening the Ridgewell file. If you're willing, we could use your insight." I stared at the message for a long time. I'd left that life for a reason, traded classified missions for coffee and sunlight. And yet here it was again, darkness, knocking politely at my picket fence. Karen's sentencing drew a crowd, reporters crowding the courthouse steps, microphones out like claws. I kept to the back hat low, letting the scene play out without me. When they brought her out, shackled but still defiant, she managed to look right at a camera. "I'll rebuild," she said. "People like me always do." She wasn't wrong, and that worried me. Harper later confirmed they'd found a coded notebook in her safe, lists of contacts, payment symbols matching other cases. She'd been deeper in the network than anyone guessed. At least for now, the web had a hole in it. Silver Ridge settled back into itself, but normal had a new definition. Priya organized a community dinner to celebrate the new charter, one that limited presidential power and required every rule to pass a majority. I went mostly out of curiosity. Kids chased fireflies, somebody grilled hot dogs, laughter replaced suspicion. When Priya handed me the microphone, I hesitated. "I'm not much for speeches," I said, "but I will say this. Rules are supposed to protect, not control. Karen used rules to build a cage. You tore it down." They clapped, and I stepped back, relieved. Later, Leonard waved me over from his porch, cigar in hand. "You ever regret getting involved?" he asked. Sometimes, I admitted. "Peace costs more than you think." He nodded. "But it's worth the receipt." "Yeah," I said, "it usually is." A week later, Harper called. "Update on our missing accountant. Hale's dead. Found in Phoenix. No struggle gunshot wound." If this was a cleanup job, Karen will never get the chance to rebuild. The network eats its own. "Good," I said. After we hung up, I went outside, breathed in the night. The kind of silence that follows. Justice heavy but earned. I looked up at the maple, remembering that first day, the pink blazer, the binder, the arrogance. Now it was all history, folded up like an old violation slip. I pressed the remote, watched the garage door close slow and steady across the quiet cul-de-sac. "Order restored," I whispered. And this time it wasn't irony, it was peace. 6 months drifted by, and spring crept back into Silver Ridge like an apology grass. A little greener fences, fresh painted laughter echoing down sidewalks where paranoia used to live. HOA meetings got shorter, friendlier with more coffee than confrontation. For the first time, bylaws sounded like background noise instead of threats. Sometimes I'd walk the dog down Maple Court and catch a neighbor's smile that lingered longer than before, a nod that said, "Thanks for cleaning the rot without burning down the house." I never corrected them. What I did wasn't heroism. It was just maintenance, same as always, just on a messier engine. Karen Holbrook. Kara Holman really was now serving her sentence in a low-security federal facility in Kansas. The papers called her the HOA Queen of Fraud, and from what the Bureau grapevine told me, she hated the title. Already, she'd tried to organize inmates into a community improvement committee. Some folks just can't retire from control. But her story didn't end there, and neither did mine. One afternoon, Harper called from D.C., voice low and serious. "Cole, you remember that Ridgewell accountant, Richard Hale, the dead one?" "Yeah. Turns out he wasn't working alone. The network's bigger than we thought. They were using HOAs across the country, funneling little payments under the radar, low risk, high efficiency. Karen was just a gear. And that gear squealed, 'Yep, we've got warrants in 3 more states now.' Your evidence started a chain reaction." I sat with the phone in my hand, garage fan humming, feeling the weight of it. "You're welcome," I told Harper. He laughed. "You sure you don't want back in desk work, advisory role, train the next batch of agents?" "I've trained enough to know I'd rather talk to engines," I said. "But send me the files, I'll take a look." That evening I sat at the workbench where all this started. The Nortons sat there fully restored, every bolt shining like it'd been waiting for closure too. I turned the old radio to a jazz station, fuzzy, warm. The sky outside was the color of cooling steel. As I tightened the last screw on the bike, my mind drifted to Karen, her voice, her posture, that unshakable belief that control meant safety. I used to think people like her were the villains of small worlds, the petty tyrants, the ones who needed fences more than empathy. But I'd seen enough now to realize she wasn't a monster, just a symptom. There's something about power that makes people forget why they wanted it. At first, it's about fixing things, improving property values, protecting the community. But somewhere along the way, they start believing rules are holy, that disobedience is sin. Karen didn't want order, she wanted worship. And when she didn't get it, she built her own little religion out of fear. Irony was she'd tried to weaponize a garage door and it ended with the FBI walking through hers. Silver Ridge changed after that. People talked more. We had block parties again. Leonard started Fix-It Fridays. Neighbors brought broken appliances to my garage, and I helped patch up whatever could be patched. Wasn't about repairs, was about trust. The garage that once drew suspicion became the heart of the block. Priya kept her promises, too. She pushed for neighbor mediation, swapped fines for community service, even set up an anonymous hotline for complaints, one that actually led to conversations instead of punishment. It worked. People stopped whispering about each other, started showing up for one another. The best part was the new HOA motto carved into the clubhouse wall, "Order without fear." Every time I walked past, I couldn't help but smile. Then one morning, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter handwritten on prison stationery. The return address twisted my stomach, Federal Correctional Institute, Topeka. Inside a single-page, sharp, slanted script. "Daniel, I hope you're satisfied. You humiliated me, destroyed everything I built, and left me to rot among people beneath me. But you should know something. I didn't start Ridagewell's game, I ended it once. They pulled me back. You think you stopped a crime, but you only clipped a branch. The roots are still growing. When I'm out, I'll finish what I started. K." No threats, no apologies, just venom disguised as prophecy. I folded the letter, slipped it into a folder labeled archive, and slid it into the cabinet beside my workbench. Fear thrives on attention. I wasn't about to give it any. Still, I knew she was right about one thing: the roots did go deeper. Next day I called Harper. She wrote to me, let me guess, cryptic threat, self-pity, prophecy. Pretty much. Good. That means she's scared. We've already frozen every Ridagewell account she ever touched. She's got nowhere to go but her own reflection. I chuckled. Keep that poetic streak, Cole. We'll need it when they make the movie. God help them if they cast someone handsome, I joked. We both laughed, and for the first time in months, the tension broke. A few months later, the Bureau invited me to Quantico for a closed session training new agents on the psychology of deception. I almost turned them down, but Harper insisted. You've earned a few students. So I went, stood in front of those young faces, all certainty and adrenaline, and told them what Karen had reminded me: most criminals don't start as criminals. They start as people trying to fix something the world broke. They convince themselves that shortcuts are just efficiency, that lying is strategy, that control is safety. But every shortcut costs a piece of your soul. By the time you realize how much you've paid, the receipt's already stamped. And remember this, I finished, sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Listen carefully. When I came home, Silver Ridge was golden in the late light. Kids set up lemonade stands. Neighbors lingered on porches. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the America we all promise ourselves still exists, somewhere between fences and forgiveness. I stood in my driveway, coffee mug in hand, watching the maple leaves rustle. That tree had grown a bit. Its shadow stretched longer across the asphalt. Life moves on quietly, persistently, beautifully. Inside the Norton sat gleaming, finally ready for its first real ride. I slipped on my gloves, swung a leg over the seat, turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, steady, clean, strong. I rode through Silver Ridge, slow passing houses that looked brighter than I remembered. At the end of the cul-de-sac, a sign caught my eye. Community open house, all welcome. Karen would have hated that word. Welcome was too uncontrollable, too democratic. The thought made me laugh. When I hit the main road, I stopped, looked back at the neighborhood that tested and taught me more than any federal case ever had. I came here for peace and found purpose. Funny how those two overlap when you're not looking for them. I whispered. Permission granted, and opened the throttle. Sometimes life puts you face to face with people who thrive on power, rules, and fear. They'll try to control you, make you question your right to peace. Don't let them. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand its ground. Justice isn't revenge, it's responsibility. Document the facts, stay calm under pressure, believe that doing the right thing doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. If you've ever dealt with your own HOA, Karen, remember, patience is a weapon and integrity is armor. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and share your own story about standing up to injustice. And don't forget to subscribe for more true HOA dramas, because sometimes the quietest garage hides the loudest truth.